Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. Glad you're here. So we'd love to know, there's so many things that we can do with artificial intelligence. We're going to talk a bit about that today. As always, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, please feel free to do so. And if you have any way that you use AI by any chance to analyze data, and or to respond appropriately to data, let us know in the chat. We'd love to hear what people are doing and how that's working for you. I know that for myself, I have taken qualitative data and asked. Qualitative data can be a little tricky to analyze because there's so many words. AI has helped me out a bit with that. But I know there's other methods as well. So welcome, whether you are watching online here live, or you're watching the recording later, or perhaps you're watching us on Facebook. Welcome, we're glad you're here to learn some more about AI. And we have an MTSS data technician with us today, so probably use data quite a bit. Would love to hear any AI systems that you use. Or anybody else also. Thanks so much for that. All right. I will be monitoring the slides the entire time, so please feel free to connect and chat during this time using the chat, and I'll be sure to answer questions and ask our speakers questions if need be then. Thank you for those of you watching. We have some Facebook Live viewers as well, so thank you to you. And just keeping in mind, particularly since we're talking about equity, some people may be watching on their phones, so we'll be sure to explain and or read what's on our slides so that everybody has access. Thank you. We do have someone's, excuse me, someone talking about dialogue with privacy policies, which is excellent. So thank you for sharing that. Let's go ahead and move forward. I have a frog in my throat, as you can tell. Apologies. So we are here today because this is part of our Learning with AI, Learning About AI webinar series that accompanies our State Department guidance. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to check that out. There's a bit.ly here. There is also a QR code. This session will be recorded, and if you have registered, you will receive a copy of all of this information in an email in a couple of days. So, wanted to also point out that we have a resource kit available to accompany the AI guidance, and that is also on that webpage, and you can download a PDF of the resource kit. So feel free to do that. I will point out that we do have one of our county offices, San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools, is featured in the resource kit. And we have Omar Shepard here, who's going to be speaking with us from representing San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools. So glad you are here. There's also a district example if you'd like to see how districts are approaching AI as well. All right, so myself and my colleague, Dr. Christina Mattis, go ahead and run these, facilitate these professional learning opportunities for you. And we always have a question to think about for each of these webinars. We have a special focus this month on equity, and as such, we actually have all of our February webinars feature CSTA, that's the Computer Science Teachers Association, CSTA Equity Fellows. So we have two wonderful Equity Fellows with us today. There are recordings of previous webinars that had Equity Fellows featured. And next week, we will have some more Equity Fellows joining us. So very excited to really focus on AI with equity as a foundation, looking through a computer science lens. My name is Catherine Goyette. I'm the computer science coordinator and the head of AI initiatives here at CDE. And what we're looking at today is the question of how might we utilize AI to highlight and to address inequities. So this is a pretty complex question, to be honest, and there's lots of ways that we can look at this. And so certainly want to, as always, we're bringing some speakers here that are utilizing these tools for the sake of equity to share with us some ideas so that we can learn more and move forward. Before we do, I just move on to those speakers. I do want to point out that with our AI guidance, we have some fundamental skills that do align to this question today. So one of those fundamental skills that we call upon all educators and students to consider developing in regards to AI, one of them is safe use. So making sure that we are safe as we are reviewing data, that we understand user privacy, particularly if we are putting in some data that is has students involved. Also, we want to leverage our AI capabilities, but also critique its inaccuracies. So doing this in a very safe manner. And then also our social impacts. We want to make sure that however we are moving forward, we're doing so with a lens of equity. And so we'll be speaking about that. And then finally, we want to build an understanding of how AI systems work. And that's where our computer science lens really helps out. So without further ado, I would love to invite a great colleague and friend of mine, Omar Shepard, who is a project specialist I actually took this, I think this title is correct, Omar. I took it off of another slide, but of digital learning and computer science education at San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools. And Omar, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and then we'll move on with your slides.
Thank you, Kat. It's great to be in the space today to connect with educators from, dare I say, across the state of California. It is really exciting. My name's Omar Shepard, as shared, and I do have the honor of serving as a project specialist in digital learning and computer science education here with the San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools. Funny I say here, as I'm actually in Anaheim right now at the SIS Symposium, where we just wrapped up a workshop titled Rising to the Call for Equity in Computer Science Education. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm looking forward to sharing some reflection of the work we've been doing in San Bernardino and really engaging in this wondering around ways we can leverage AI as a vehicle to support addressing inequities in our programs and services. So as we think about the work that we've been engaging in San Bernardino, let me just kind of give you a glimpse. We're working with about 33 school districts, representing just under 400,000 students. So the opportunity to think about meeting the needs of all of your learners comes up in our work every day. And in our work in San Bernardino, we're really being given some great opportunities to work with district leaders and educators to do some exciting things. Next slide. So our work really began, as AI became proliferated around the speak and edu spaces to raise some awareness on things that educational leaders might think of when they think about AI in their school communities. Things like how might we be aware of student data privacy considerations as we're looking to AI as a vehicle? How might we consider what needs to be incorporated in our AI guidelines and policies as a district as we think about bringing these tools to bear to work with educators, as well as how might we consider things along the lens of access to students that may have an IEP, students ready for a challenge, or ways we could even support our educators with looking at ways they may be able to lighten the load. Next slide. So it was here that we began to discover that as educators began to wonder, well, gee, this is great to learn about some of these protocols for engaging and developing prompts with AI. But, I've got some students top of mind right now. Could this tool help me with being able to scaffold my lessons to provide more personalized learning experiences? Might this tool help me to look to some of what's included in the IEPs of some of my students to make sure I'm scaling up or sideways as needed to be able to support making sure those students are reaching those grade level outcomes, as well as ways I can really try to find some regeneration of fun and excitement with lessons I may have been doing for a number of years. Next slide. So it was here that we began to discover an opportunity to look to how might we get some information from student performance on various tasks? How might we get some clues as to how are my students engaged as I deliver this content? And to be able to look to AI as a vehicle to be able to support surfacing any ideas. Now, when we think about things along the lens of a reference that Kat just made along the terms of qualitative data, how can we bring in some of these student responses to see what trends are surfacing here? What are some ways I can look at where there may be some gaps in either student understanding or their ability to engage with the content more deeply, to really be more strategic and looking at how we can make sure all the lessons are organized in a way to meet the needs of all learners. And then really it was there where I would say a light bulb went off. It was a chance to really think about schools and systems more broadly, both from the classroom perspective, but also as a leader looking to the establishment of programs and services within schools to be able to consider where AI may be able to be that thought partner that we can lean into, that may be able to support us with surfacing a new understanding. Next slide. Where might there be program cliffs or service valleys? This idea that when we're creating this opportunity for these new exciting programs that we're introduced to in our schools and to create new opportunities for access to students, where there may need to be more support. As without it, while the opportunity is there, more support may be needed for students to be able to reach those goals that we've established. Where might there be service valleys? Sometimes when we're looking at the outcomes using our human eye, there may be things that we naturally gravitate to. There may be things that stand out to us that maybe we're not seeing as it relates to using an AI tool to help surface insights to allow us to think more strategically when we think about how we're organizing our structures within our school and what programs we're making available. One interesting thing is really peeling back the onion when thinking about that California school dashboard and all of the different metrics that leaders look to when they consider how are we doing as a school? Are we meeting all of our students' needs? How might we learn from these data to help us be really intentional as we think about meeting the needs of all the students, whether it's students on an IEP that may need some very specific programming or students that are ready for a challenge? Are we meeting the mark when it comes to that? And this is where a real interesting opportunity really comes. Next slide. How might we leverage AI as a vehicle to really lean into these notions around quantitative data? That is, taking the actual metrics from the California school dashboard and refining them in a way to where we can be able to enter them into an AI tool to ask some really targeted questions. Questions like, as these data are being evaluated, where might be some areas I'll want to focus to make sure that any areas where students aren't meeting the outcomes as a spouse within other groups to ensure that we're thinking of ways to incorporate that. Might it be a need to incorporate more culturally responsive pedagogical strategies? Might it be a need to identify what professional learning might be available to our educators to help ensure they're able to engage the students in ways that acknowledges their lived experiences, acknowledges their culture, and allows us to be able to collaborate in the learning space to be able to reach the outcomes we've espoused for our students? What about qualitative data? As a district leader, there are often opportunities that there are to either lean into input that's gathered from from student observations or parent surveys, parent and community input. All of these different metrics are really a lot to take in. If you think about, for example, having a site with, dare I say, 1,000 students and getting a percentage of families respond, are we thinking of ways we can surface some of what we're learning from our community to really make sure that we're thinking critically about how the programs that we're implementing are meeting the needs of our school community? That's this idea of a programming cliff, this idea that we came back inspired. We're ready to bring in this new programming opportunity. And yes, we did engage in some professional learning, but how are we establishing that community of practice to identify emerging best practices and best practices that we can lean into to meet the needs of those students? And or what are the ways in which we can learn more about how we can structure programming to make sure it's reflective of the dreams, hopes, and desires of our community as we work to create a space that's safe for learning and inclusive of all students? Next slide. I would say one of the most exciting opportunities really comes when you think about the opportunity to make data driven decisions. And that is, one thing that I offered in the chat was every day I try to think of ways I can use AI. Is it as a way to support the districts that we're serving by leaning into that notion of thought partnership? Is there a way that we can look to what is being surfaced as we analyze that data to give us some new clues on ways we may want to approach programming? How are we ensuring that we're personalizing the learning experiences of all of our students? Now, it definitely is to be noted that there is a heavy lift that teachers are taking daily as they engage with their students, especially when you think about some of our requirements and multiple initiatives on sites, as well as when you think of secondary educators that may have easily 150 students that they're serving. How can we make sure that we're not just relying on our own, I would say, draw to the wind? That is, as the wind blows, we're kind of looking in that direction to now look to actual information that can be gathered, whether it's through qualitative or quantitative analyses, now leaning into AI as a thought partner. As I chat with Kat, that does rhyme, about today's session, we were really thinking about, so often we're tasked with evaluating our programs and we're using everything from statistical data and analyses, our own personal observations and leanings to give us insights. How might we better look to ways we can prevent programming cliffs and service valleys by utilizing some of what we learn as we engage with AI tools to ensure that we have what we're referring to as an efficient workflow, from the opportunity to learn about programs that we'll implement, ways we can shore up and understand what professional learning needs there are, and ways we can ensure that our family and community outcomes are reached based on the desires of our families for their students. Next slide. So it really is about moving forward to a shared vision. This idea, by embracing AI as a tool for equity, we can create a future where all students have access to the resources and support they need to thrive. And we can work together to make sure that we harness the power of AI and ensure that we're creating equitable outcomes for all students in our community and in our schools. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share. I'm wondering, might there be any questions or how we'll navigate the next portion of this?
Thank you, Omar. I appreciate I had not heard that term, program cliffs and service valleys. I don't know if that's something you had made up or that analogy, but I like that because so many times we implement a program, an initiative, and we either, as you said, we're very busy. Maybe we don't take the time to look at that data. And so what I really appreciate as well is um, I appreciate how you said at the beginning, sometimes when we as humans look at data, we're looking at a certain thing. Sometimes we say, oh, well, I think this program's going to produce this result. And we maybe miss some of the hidden inequities in the data. So I think that's a really interesting concept. I love that. I did want to ask for those, and please, if you do have questions, you may ask in the comment section if you're watching on Facebook Live, or you can ask in the chat here on Zoom. But I was wondering, Omar, in regards to this data, how do we make sure, what do we need to be aware of in order to make sure that we are not giving student data away? We're not, impacting personal information. What should we make sure we take out, for example, just to be extra clear on that?
Oh, absolutely. And that's part of what I referenced when I shared earlier about refining the data for presentation to the AI tool. It's ultimately PII, personally identifiable information, ways to allow us to be able to gather the results, whether it was in a survey or in a classroom observation or some input from family and community, that is de-identified, as in not being ascribed to any particular individual and or student or community, but rather the results as it stands to allow us to be able to use that. Now, remember, this whole idea of working with AI is a novel approach that requires some intentionality amongst us as educators and leaders to be able to see it as a way to support us through our thought processes, through our planning and programming and reflection processes, to ensure that we're identifying some of what's being shared in new ways. Additionally, when thinking about some of that dashboard data, it may be inclusive of removing any specific site name or city, et cetera, but rather looking at the metrics themselves. That's one cool thing about quantitative data, is that you're looking at the numbers. So it's a little bit easier to work with that versus some of the qualitative data that may have more, I would say, information about whom is submitting this or sharing it included. Hope that helps.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you for that. And also, just with that qualitative data piece, many schools will have parent surveys that go back, or like you're saying, observational data. And how many times do we say, oh, that's just so much to look at? I just don't know how to make sense of it, right? I don't have the time. So definitely a great strategy to utilize AI to give us some of those highlights, to kind of show us a bit of those inequities. So really appreciate, Omar, all that you've said in regards to kind of a district or school leader lens in utilizing AI. And then also, you touched upon how educators can then utilize AI to personalize their lessons and address these inequities. And so our next speaker is going to speak more on that classroom lens. So we are hearing from two different perspectives here that really work well together. And so, so excited. And again, if you all have questions or comments, you can still go ahead and mention those in the chat there. But our next speaker is another CSTA Equity Fellow. This is Lisa Moe. She's a sixth grade teacher from Corona Norco Unified School District, and very passionate about all that she does. I think we met maybe once in person, Lisa, but I've seen her speak and have seen her work, and am very excited to continue to hear from Lisa. So without further ado, Lisa, if you want to go ahead and unmute and let us know some of the insight that you have for us.
Well, thank you. Hello, everyone, and excellent job, Omar. Love being in these spaces with all of you. So yeah, we could go to the next slide, but yes, I'm Lisa Moe, as Catherine lovingly introduced me, and I'm so excited to be here and just sharing with you this passionate work that, it's going to take all of us. So I'm excited to, talk about it. So you could go to the next slide. So I did want to just briefly talk about these points that we kind of talked about at the beginning today and that Omar also mentioned, but just these key pillars of our AI guidance. And one is the transparency that that these tools are understandable, that we understand how they're working, and that we're not just completely going into this with so much trust that it's AI, it knows it all, that we do have, the right to ask the questions, and that it's not just benefiting some it's benefiting all. And the data and privacy that we've been talking about, that student information must be protected. I think that is going to always be #1 priority. And then, of course, the AI literacy. Educators and students should be taught how AI works and its biases, which we're going to talk about today. So, yes, so what's at stake? Well, we're talking about the biases here in the algorithms, unequal access to AI tools. And again, I want to really, really, really point out here is who is designing these AI platforms. These developers, they're not always reflecting the diversity of our classrooms. And in that case, that is where our role plays a vital role. It's that if we're not involved in the AI development, who's ensuring that it's going to be safe for our students? So we really have to be the advocates here in this. And this goes with that unequal access to it, this digital divide that we know so much about in one sense, but now we're throwing in AI and do these students have options of this at home? Do they have accessibility? I know just within my district, at my school site to the school right down the street, there's a huge, huge divide in what students are having access to. So we want to really make sure that when we are talking about this, that again, we are understanding what's at stake. Next slide, please. So we talk a lot about AI in education, but we also have to look at the inequities in computer science. And as an equity fellow, I'm very excited to talk more about this and honored. So again, we're talking about the access of it. Many underrepresented students are not having this access due to the lack of funding and resources in their schools. There's a bias in curriculum. So the bias in the training of the data. Most AI models are trained on data sets that underrepresent diverse cultures, voices, and perspectives, which means they often fail to recognize or fairly represent certain groups. And of course, the career pathways. AI-powered hiring tools have been shown to reinforce bias, and it's favoring candidates from privileged backgrounds while filtering out historically marginalized groups. So this is still very, very present as much as we want to aim and we see a future that is, closing that divide. There's still quite some work that we have to that we have to do. Next slide, please. So I did want to talk about the positives here and bring in some of my student voices here. So one of them is the ability for AI speech to text. I have several students with different learning needs and just having that ability for them to capture their notes. And I did want to point out, I had a student last year, she's thriving in middle school now, but she did have cancer and she was learning from home. And I was able to give her an opportunity to continue learning with our class thanks to AI and technology. She was able to Zoom in whether she was in hospital or at home. And on those days that she was feeling weak or it was too much to, write or type, just having these tools of AI that could note take for her and really gather the information for her or that she could speak to it and it would produce, her thinking and just giving her that ability. That to me is the power of AI, is the opportunity that we can give our students. This will always make me emotional because I was able to see her through this journey and be there in a way for her in uncharted waters. So not only her cancer, but now we're also throwing in, ed tech, we're throwing in Zoom, we're throwing in AI, we're throwing in computer science, but we are able to watch her confidence grow. And as a result, be able to keep her as a core student within our classroom, even when she wasn't there. Additionally, I have students that are English learners. So having AI chatbots that they could practice their language skills and using computer science, we will code our vocabulary words onto a microbit and they could use it to generate and design those words using Play-Doh. There's so many accessibility ways of success with AI that these are just some of those things that I love to highlight with it. However, next slide, please. How many of you have students who mix languages when writing or speaking? So you are more than welcome to add, but yes. Yeah, and then we could go to the next slide. This is my big question. What happens when AI doesn't recognize their brilliance? That is a huge, huge question that I want to kind of have you sit with for just a moment here. And you could go to the next slide. So some of these fails when they are not recognizing the brilliance of these students. AI is misidentifying or flagging a student's name as incorrect. I have students all across campus with diverse names, beautiful names. However, even something as simple as autocorrect, which is a form of AI, is marking it as wrong and is, making them not feel represented and not feel welcomed into this environment. These are just some of those biases that are occurring, or these inequities that are occurring. A student, in my GATE program was generating an image, using Canva. We're creating projects, and each image did not represent their identity. So these are still things that, again, are happening. It's here, it's exciting, but it's also very isolating. It's also making our students not feel seen, not feeling heard. But one of my biggest ones here is that I have a student that is a creative writer and can write these incredible stories, these adventures that I can't even put my own imagination in, but they really spark it. And with AI rubrics, it just completely tore it apart. It gave the feedback that, seems unrealistic. And this was kind of like a test for me. I didn't want my student to see this. This was me kind of using a tool just to see the feedback. We go to these trainings that are like, let's save teachers time. And that's great. That's great to have these tools that will build a rubric and will help grade and all this. But if we're not carefully looking at it, we could really be adding to the harm and the inequities that are occurring. So when I saw this, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, had I not read through this, if I just trusted it and handed it over to my student, I could be really stunting my students' creative process. And I could really be making my student feel that their writing isn't good, that they're not capable of this because of what this rubric said that the AI generated. So again, these are just some of those areas that we also need to really, they might seem small, but for those students, it's reinforcing that, that their ideas, their thoughts, their identities are not important. And so we need to continue to advocate for that. Next slide, please. And data speaks. Omar had some beautiful data, but I got some of this data here is that 50% of AI models show racial or gender bias. And low-income students are 40% less likely to access AI-powered learning tools. And those are some pretty high percentages. So I heard a quote once that said that the dumbest AI is ever going to be is 1 second ago. It is always getting smarter. It is always learning. It is always growing. Yet we're still seeing these numbers, these percentages. So again, it's not us relying on the tool. It's us teaching the tool, being the advocates, speaking up, making sure that we are advocating for not only AI as a bigger picture, but for the students that are in our classroom, because they are the future of AI. So if we don't start teaching them now, who will? Next slide, please. So I do want to say this. So how can educators push for CS equity in AI? We have to be able to expand access to AI and computer science education in underrepresented communities. As a CSA Equity Fellow, and whether I am or I am not, this is a need that I will stand up here and continue to push and push and push forward. We need to audit curriculum for bias and include diverse perspectives in AI discussions. having conversations like we're having now is so important to the future of AI. And we need to teach the AI ethics alongside programming to create socially responsible developers. Our students are the ones that are, they're being introduced to it, they're being exposed to computer science. I know my students are, but if I'm not also teaching them the ethics of it, if I'm not teaching them that literacy of it to really critically think and see their own biases, these things will only continue to occur. So I want them to be able to visualize and see and notice and call out and advocate when they see the biases that are happening. Next slide, please. So 3 actions that you can take right now is 1, demand transparency from AI vendors. I go to a lot of conferences, as I'm sure many of you do. I know some of you are there right now. You talk to a lot of vendors. Some of them will really tell you this is the best thing for your classroom. This is going to be a game changer in your classroom. You need to know the privacy that is involved with this. Are my students going to be, protected? Is there safety measures here? And I also want to be able to use the tool in a way that I'm not doing all the work of the inequities. I want to make sure that we're going to have an open conversation in the transparency of what's happening. Too many of the vendors sometimes are just these pretty sparkly gifts that look great, but you go to use it and it is not actually there to support our students. It's not actually there to, help teachers. It's actually adding on more work to us in our advocacy. We also need to be able to close the digital divide, which to me, from the pandemic forward, we have seen thankfully more and more push of what tech is out there. We're trying to get more of these opportunities in the hands of our teachers and our students, but that also goes with the proper professional developments, the trainings, that we're not just handing it over and saying, here you go. We want to make sure that they're getting that equitable access to their education as well. That goes for educators and students. And again, making sure that we're teaching AI literacy. I cannot, emphasize that enough, that if students don't understand how AI works, then they're not going to be able to know when it's working against them. So we must teach them to spot the bias and challenge these decisions and think critically about AI generated content. Next slide, please. So we're getting close. Where have you seen AI impact students positively or negatively? I shared with you today the positive stories, the stories that really melt my heart, and those negative stories that push me. They push me more to advocate and speak and work with all of you. Next slide, please. So AI in education is our responsibility. Will we let it widen gaps, or will we demand better? Slide, please. So how are you going to advocate for AI equity in your school or district? It's about ensuring that AI recognizes and values all students. Next slide. So the future of AI equity depends on the actions we take today. We cannot wait for it in the future. We cannot keep speaking of these are our students are the leaders of tomorrow. No, it's happening today. So we need to start preparing them today. We need to start advocating today. Next slide, please. Change your mindset, change their lives. The future of AI depends on the actions we take today. If we don't advocate for equity in AI, who will? Thank you. I'm Lisa Mo, and it's been a pleasure to be here with all of you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I so appreciate the stories that you shared about AI in your classroom, with your students, with you as a teacher. That's a fascinating example that you shared about the auto grader that, thank goodness you didn't just give that feedback to the student, because it would have crushed them, because you know your students. It reminds me of often we hear of humans being in the loop of AI, but I like to think humans should be in the driver's seat. We are the ones that, are capable of empathy and capable of a human relationship and understanding the human experience. So thank you for pointing that out. Also, loved your emphasis on AI literacy. And by the way, and doing that today, because do we really even know what we mean when we say AI literacy, right? That's something that Omar and I had the great opportunity of hearing Ken Shelton speak just, gosh, was that yesterday? And he asked us, who knows a good definition of AI literacy or has heard it? And so I want to tell you that I think I might have a slide for it. Do I have one? I don't. But there is the AB 28, Assembly Bill 2876, I believe, calls upon future curriculum frameworks to integrate AI literacy. We haven't yet defined that as a state, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't move forward, as you were saying, Lisa, and as you were saying, Omar, to make sure that there is an understanding with students of how they can leverage this in a positive way, how can they can be safe, et cetera. So definitely appreciate both of you for really pointing out the urgency of the situation. Thank you so much. Damien dropped in the link to that bill if anybody is interested. And so this is something that's coming. We know that this is important. So Lisa, Omar, thank you so much. I'd love to hear if there are any comments or questions. Please feel free to use the chat. Oh, yes, love this comment in the chat. There are no AI in ed experts at this time because it's all so new to us, right? So absolutely, it takes a village and all of that. Yes, and that is why I bring in others to speak with all of you because we can't, not one of us can know all of the different perspectives that we need to consider when we're thinking about AI. Definitely appreciate that. Lisa, was there anything that you wanted to share on these last couple of slides about your contact information and such?
Yes, I am an open book, so please, I love to support. I love to learn from each of you, and I love to have conversations. So please connect with me. And I did provide some resources. There's a little QR code there. Just some things that I like to use and look to as I am continuing to grow and define my, AI literacy journey as well. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Lisa. I also wanted to ask, uh, now, Lisa, are you a computer science teacher? Do you teach a computer science standalone course?
I am actually not. I am a sixth grade teacher and I'm also the gate coordinator. So I have been trying to move the needle at my school and my district. I have to give a shout out to Emphasis Pathfinders. I won a $30,000 grant last year to bring in more computer science and training to teachers and students across the district. So we're getting there. We're moving. We're moving.
Awesome. Yeah. So Lisa pointed out the inequities that exist in the tech sector as well as in those who are designing these AI models. And so you may ask, well, where does CS fit in? I'm not a CS teacher. And so just wanted to show this example that computer science can be integrated into other concept areas or into other content areas. And even if this is something that not all of our students are going to go be programmers. However, we want them to have an understanding so they can responsibly know how to vote, know how to, know if they're an employer, if they should use AI for hiring, and if so, what questions to ask, right? So absolutely. Omar, I'd also love to hear from you. I know you are part of the leadership of the Seasons of CS EWIG grant. So can you tell us the tagline in regards to computer science about all teachers and all students? Do you recall it off the top of your mind?
Absolutely. That all teachers can teach CS and all students should learn CS.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And we believe that's a portion of AI literacy here at the state. If you look at our guidance, have some great things in the chat. I want to call out for those that are watching the recording. Damien, I believe, was a data specialist, or if I'm recalling correctly, in a district. And so using Qualtrics Insights Explorer, powered by AI using Claude 3 Haiku model to analyze open-ended feedback from needs and asset surveys. I love that. That's fantastic. I know Qualtrics has some excellent tools. Helps generate themes, headlines, and summaries. Still perfecting the process, but it offers a valuable method for reviewing feedback. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. I also see in the chat, AI literacy is everyone's job at this point. It's where we are. Absolutely. All right. And oh, yes, also just wanted to I asked Omar this question. I'm seeing it in the chat again. Um, what would you say, Lisa, in terms of data privacy? We heard from Omar talking about data privacy from the leader and perhaps classroom teacher perspective. What would you say in regards to students? How are you informing them about data privacy in regards to AI?
So one of the things, like whenever I'm introducing it, especially as I'm working with like the third graders or fourth graders, and we're talking about generative AI, and it's all cool and all that, but you kind of have to mask it around like stranger danger. You gotta give those things of like, you don't give out your personal information. That when we are creating, when we are innovating, you want to really be able to protect yourself too. And I also say, like, you wouldn't want someone else to take your creative, who you are, your creative ideas. And so I think that keeping that conversation at the forefront, scaffolding it depending on the age has really been helpful as they're understanding. We just give adjectives as we're creating images, and we're using it in a learning lesson versus don't tell it who you are. You don't need to do that. So,
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's a new level to how we used to teach kids media literacy and staying safe online and such. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Absolutely appreciate that. I also see in the chat a mention of SB 1288. That was Senate Bill 1288 that calls for CDE to have an AI work group to create a model policy for districts as well as to expand the guidance. That is in planning process, and we'd love to have your input. There will be a survey that you'll get with this. With the slides and such that you can fill out. All of the registrants are going to receive an email containing the links to the CDE AI resources, link to this presentation, and again, as I said, an opportunity to provide input for that work group. And if you are looking for examples of what it can look like to have an AI work group in a school district, check out that resource kit. We have one more webinar this month. It is equity-minded instruction in an age of AI. So really thinking about, particularly with some of the things we heard from Omar and Lisa in regards to AI highlighting some inequities, what does that mean for instruction? And so we are going to have some excellent speakers come, more CSTA Equity Fellows, by the way, will be here next week. And I will also include in the email that I'll be sending out a link to one of our March webinars that will be coming out. So glad that you all were here. I want to thank you all for everything you do. Have a fantastic, fantastic day, and have a great one.